You're listening to the Staffa Corner Podcast, a Staffa-tarian look at entertainment and life with your host, Greg Staffa.
My guest this episode is talented actor Matt Drago. He has a new film that came out on video on demand last month. It's called Somewhere in Montana. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Greg, thanks so much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Where are you from?
So originally, I come from two parents that were born in New York City, but they both met in rural Virginia. So I grew up kind of a country boy in the foothills of the Shenandoah Valley, but I moved back to New York City to pursue acting. I just grew up doing a lot of regional shows, community theater, and it was just kind of the next step in my process, you could say, to almost move back home because I'd heard all the stories from my mom and dad growing up in New York City. And I felt like that was kind of where I belonged for my next chapter. So after I graduated high school, I went right up to New York City. I trained with some great acting teachers and voice teachers up there and got my degree from Marymount Manhattan College and studied with the best of the best and just kind of honed in my craft and continued to find my people. And a few years ago, then I decided to take the trip out west to pursue more TV and film. And now I'm in LA.
At an early age, you wanted to be an actor. What was it, though, that made you decide? I mean, it's one thing to do plays and stuff, community theater, but you really knew that this was your future. You wanted the education out of it. What was it that made you take that bigger leap?
Honestly, Greg, the love of storytelling. I felt from an early age, I was just one of those kids that, just needed my own imagination. I would create a lot of scenarios and characters in my backyard, playing around with my friends. And it was just something that I always say was born inside of me. As I grew up, I obviously, worked on developing the craft. And that's why I always say to actors that are getting into it, I mean, your mentors are everything because they really teach you a little bit more form in how to create your own process as an artist. But it's something, honestly, that I really loved from the minute I was put onto this planet. I just felt the power in storytelling. I felt that, stories and human stories specifically were something that I love to live inside. I felt like it was a way for me to experience the world in a big way. And I say it all the time, but it was really the first love of my life.
I don't mean to put words into your mouth or imply anything. A lot of the actors that I've talked to, one of the reasons why they get involved in acting is they might have been like a single child that never had a brother or sister, so acting became an escape to be something else, or they had done with some tragedy, or they had gone through some experiences where they wanted to get away. Was there anything like that growing up in your childhood, or was it just purely a love of storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think all families have challenges, right? But I think that, there are lots of different people that find lots of different career paths for lots of different reasons, right? I will tell you that from my family upbringing, I have a very interesting scenario, which is that I am the oldest, the youngest, and an only child. So I'll explain that. My dad, his first marriage, he had 3 boys. And so I grew up the youngest of 4 boys in a household with my brothers. And then when my dad was divorced, basically my mom and dad had me. And it was probably about 10, 11 years that I grew up an only child, really, because all of my brothers had kind of moved out and were adults at that point. And then my mom and dad got divorced and my mom remarried and had my younger sister. So I was then the oldest of 2. So I feel like for me, I don't know how much of it is or isn't part of my process, to be perfectly honest, or you could say my story. but I definitely feel like acting has saved me in many times of my life because it has given me something that I love so much that I will continue to fight for it. And I have taken pretty much all the odds and ends jobs that you can think of to, keep my dream alive. I have cleaned people's houses. I have, done odds and ends handyman and painting jobs and bartending until 4 a.m. in New York City. And I just felt like because I loved acting and storytelling so much, it was something that I was always going to have something to support that. Now I am a successful real estate agent with one of the bigger teams in Los Angeles, and I balance those two things out to, again, keep the dream alive. So, whatever path you take in life and, whatever family situation it is, I think in some ways you can kind of take that to heart. It becomes obviously part of your story, but, you make your own stories too, right? And it's that classic nature versus nurture. So for me, I think it really stems back to even before I kind of knew what my family situation was going to unfold as. I really did just love the art of storytelling and just immersing myself in the world of imagination.
Was there a certain point in your life where you realized that acting was the future for you? I mean, it's one thing to study it but to make that leap to beyond that, was there any sign? Was there any just belief in yourself? What was it that you really knew that this was your future?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think that realized, I realize it more and more every day in my life, that the journey is the destination. And if you love something enough, then, you are willing to fight for it. I say this all the time, Greg, because I live in LA and I've lived in New York City, and I've been around a lot of dreamers in my life. And dreamers are fighters. Like, don't sleep on dreamers, because we will fight tooth and nail to make sure that our dreams are realized, or at least that we can keep them alive. And there's no clear path, right? And so you try to create a family. You try to create people around you that are like-minded. You try to create, kind of a safety net of people that will support you through the lowest of the lows. And I realize it more and more in my life that I wouldn't, probably have the trajectory that I have had it not been for the mentors that I, attracted into my life. And even going back to New York City, I remember asking people that were on the Broadway stage, like, who are you studying with? Could I get into that class? Just trying to study with the best. I mean, if you take anything seriously, you want to be a sponge. You want to learn as much as you can as quickly as possible. And I feel like if you are open to the path and the unknowns of the path, then, signs will come as they're supposed to in life. And I think I've adapted very much in, my development of understanding how to see those signs a little bit more. And that was something that was, pretty prevalent when I moved from New York City, which again was my home. I lived with my grandmother in New York City while I was in college. It was, some of the most special years of my life. But I felt like at a certain point I needed to, see what the other side of the country was for me. And it was actually my teacher, Terry Schreiber, in a conversation that he had with me, and just one of my truest mentors in my life, that, said, why don't you give LA a shot? And it was at the time where I had, met my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and we decided to literally just take a car across the country and just see what the next chapter would be for us. And, we gave it like a couple months, but we looked at each other a couple months later and we said, this is home now, isn't it? And yeah, we knew it was home. And it's being able to adapt. It's being able to stay open to life and, the ups and downs of life, and just being available to where the path can take you, and being available to the people that will come into your life that will be a part of your journey.
Having talked to several actors and actresses, I think it becomes easy to say, Matt Drago, actor, and dismiss all the work that goes into it, when in reality, there's a lot of rejection that I think people that are in the audience just don't realize and don't even really appreciate the amount of time and effort and the auditions and the rejections and you're on a constant job search. Tell us a little bit about the mental gymnastics that you have to do to be able to pick yourself back up and keep on trying, when I think for a lot of people that would be a very hard thing to do.
Well, first of all, Greg, I really appreciate the reflection on that because rejection is a big part of what we do in the arts. You know, you are constantly trying to show people your voice. And the reality is, you know, you need, for the most part, production and opportunity to showcase the work that you've done. And, you know, a lot of times you get those moments and they are such celebratory moments that you have to relish in them because you remember all of the times where you didn't get the call back or, you know, you were struggling. And in my life, it's been, you know, many types of struggles that I've had to overcome, but we all do that. So I don't want to make the acting profession, you know, different because, you know, there are rejections in every type of industry. But what I will say is that the path isn't as clear and you are constantly putting yourself out there and you continue to do the work. But I think the thing that you have to hold on to more than anything as a creative and an actor is you have to continue to love the work. You have to continue to love to put yourself on tape, and you have to enjoy the fact that you are getting an opportunity to showcase what you can bring uniquely to a role, because you have to realize that when you are asked to put yourself on tape, like, you have your own process. You know, like I said, I've learned from some great acting teachers. I have very many different techniques that I have, you know, learned in acting classes and with my mentors. And so sometimes I design a specific technique around a specific character, but it's just that love of it. It's just like understanding that this is your opportunity to put your stamp on how you feel you can bring life to a character. And then you have to give it away. And that's the hardest part. You have to give it away to, you know, the director, or the casting director, or the producer that, you know, saw you as somebody that could be a match. And you brought everything that you could to it, and enjoying the love of just putting yourself out there for it. And then, you know, just seeing what happens. And sometimes, Greg, the honest truth is you don't even know why a role comes to you or is a part of your life until after you do it. And I could say that about Fabian Verdugo in Somewhere in Montana. It wasn't until I was on set and I started to really live and breathe and collaborate with some incredible actors and, you know, our directors and producer, that I just realized why I was meant to carry that role. And I take that with pride. I take it with humility, but I also take it with, you know, the fact that I have been working my whole life on this one specific goal, this one specific dream, which is to leave a couple good stories behind. And like myself, Fabian Verdugo, this character that I play in this film, is very much in sync with that. He's very much about legacy and leaving stories behind, and stories that he feels like can make an impact on the world. And I feel like that in and of itself is a core to my principle as what I want to do as an actor, is to make people, you know, get in touch with their emotions and feel and hopefully teach them something in the process. That in and of itself is why I fell in love with storytelling and why I grew up always wanting to be an actor.
I want to dissect something that you said. I don't want to look too much into it. If I'm wrong, just feel free to tell me. But you had mentioned that when you're doing an audition, you kind of create the character and you audition in the way that you think that the character should be, or your interpretation of the character based on what you're auditioning for. But you said Somewhere in Montana, it really wasn't until you got on set that you realized why you were cast. Was who you auditioned as, or who the character that you interpreted, and then the role that you got, was that different than what you auditioned as, and then you realized it was something different, so you changed the your perception or your interpretation of the character, or were they relatively similar?
They were almost identical. But that's very insightful. I feel like I have gotten to the point in my acting journey and my career and my process as an actor where I try to give myself the clearest take I can on what I would bring to a character in the audition process, because that is your one and only, take, your shot, so to speak, in, showing the production what you uniquely can bring to the character. Now, within that, obviously you have to be malleable. You have to be coachable. You have to understand that, specific to Somewhere in Montana, Brandon Smith is the writer and the director. So I love collaborating with directors. In fact, it's one of my favorite things to do as an actor is having a director that sees it from the outside in, and in his case, also in the inside out, because he was the first person to put the words and the story to the page. But in doing that, you also, have your person, me as Matt, that shows up to set and starts to collaborate with, the great actors that I got to play with, Graham McTavish and Michelle Hurd and Michael Monks and Jonathan Stoddard and Kate Orsini and Tasha Gates and Kaylee Macchio, and just these phenomenal actors that I got to collaborate with. And it's when you are actually doing those scenes, because there are a lot of things about film and TV that are high stakes. You live with a character. In my case, I lived with Fabian for well over a year, because we pushed back the production a year so that we could include Graham, because he had a scheduling conflict the year before. And it was great. It gave me an extra year to live with him and, kind of develop some backstory, which is a part of my process, and how he feels, how he reacts. That way, when I get to set, I can kind of let that all go. And then the magic happens, because I think when when you've done the work and you feel very confident in the work that you've done, but then you show up and you start to collaborate and you start to have, really wonderful bonds with the cast and crew. And we became a family up there. I mean, we went on hikes together. We, shared our meals together. We had just incredible conversations, on, off camera. And I think because of that, I realized that this character is very much in line with who I am as a person. And so the two worlds kind of merged. So it wasn't that I felt like I was, changing my take on the character per se. I think it was more that I was really feeling how this role would impact my life as Matt. And, there are wonderful things about the method acting approach that really don't get enough credit, because you hear sometimes the horror stories or the people that take it too far. I think in many ways I have learned in the method acting approach with Terry Schreiber, who, was friends with Lee Strasberg, that you find a way to ground yourself in both yourself and in the character, and you just let those two worlds kind of merge in a way. And I felt like with Fabian, the method approach made sense, because I felt like there was so much alignment with me as Matt and him as Fabian, that I could just kind of forget those two and just kind of let myself fall into him and let him fall into me, and bring that to the forefront. And so that's where I used a lot of my life experiences, my upbringing, my family. But I also gave him things that, were not a part of my story, that maybe I needed to do a little bit more research on, like, not being a director. And so I showed up on set a week early and shadowed Brandon, and, different things about the character that were not like me. So, I think it was just one of those things where when you finish a role, it's this incredible feeling sometimes where some roles just feel like they will live on through you. And I feel like this role is one of those for me. And it's why I want to continue my journey, and hopefully be part of more productions and hopefully create my own productions because I understand the value of collaboration. More and more as I go through my journey in life, right? Is that it's the people around you, it's the people in life that really make an impact and make the journey of storytelling so special.
And you've been very vocal, just in looking at your social media, that somewhere in Montana it really has a special place in your heart as far as the various roles that you've had. There is a little bit, it seems like, more intimacy with getting to know the cast and crew. Did the filming locations happen to help with that? Because you weren't on a stage, in New York or in California working on a sound stage. You were doing a little bit, from the sounds of it, remote shooting. Did that kind of intimacy help in really developing a character and really getting involved in that character and kind of losing yourself?
100%. And again, so insightful because it was all on location. It was all shot in Polson, Montana. As my friend Jonathan Stoddard, who plays Spence in the film, says, it's God's wallpaper. And it's true. There's something mystical about shooting in Montana in the summer and something very special about shooting in a small town where everybody is aware that you're there making a movie. And Graham and I would go to Betty's Diner and we'd hear people behind us talk about, the movie that was going on and how exciting. And again, that process, it just has so many layers of how unique and special it is. I was walking down Polson's Main Street, shopping for a couple gifts for my wife when we had screened it up there because we did a screening at that theater that ironically was the last shot that I shot in the film was walking out of that theater. The next time I walked into that theater, it was to see the finished film. And just in meeting a couple people in the local shops, they said pretty much all the same types of feedback, which is that it was so special to see their little corner of the world showcased. And I feel like that is an impactful thing that really resonated with me because I look at our world right now and I look at our society and, art reflects life, reflects art, but I think a lot of the dissonance that we feel sometimes is that people don't feel like they have a voice. And if we can make these little films that showcase a Polson, Montana, or a little part of Virginia that I'm from, maybe it gives people a little bit more pride in the fact that they're seen and they're heard. And I really did. I felt like I fully grasped that when I started to get the feedback from the locals that day. And it's just, again, special is the word that keeps coming up, but it is. It's a special, unique process when you get to live in the world where you're shooting it. I felt like I was learning things about even the characters that Brandon had created in the script. And then I'd meet the person that character was based on in real life because we would go to that local restaurant and we'd meet that person that he wrote into the script as that, bartender or, that person at the barber shop or, that unique person, that owned this or did that. And they're all created into the tapestry of this big story that we're telling to connect people, to make people understand that you don't have to agree on everything, but that there is more that connects us than could ever divide us if we let each other in.
And did having that location for somewhere in Montana, did that help being so far? Well, did that help being far enough away from Hollywood where you weren't worried about, paparazzi popping in? You weren't worried about, I'm sure there was some fans in the town that, wanted to catch an eye on what was being filmed, but you kind of had a safety net away from Hollywood. That kind of isolation, did that help kind of take some of the pressure off of what you were doing and just be in your own environment where you were hanging out with the actors and actresses? you weren't feeling that pressure and burden of Hollywood?
Yeah, I think so. I think specifically because we were living in the world that, the film is based in, made it very special. You have to try as an actor, almost like an athlete, to tune out noise in whatever way that you can. And I think that the best way that you do that, like the athlete in practice, practicing their reps, some of the best plays that happen in sports are made on the practice field. I think that's the same in acting. It's that if you continue to do your reps as an actor and you continue to enjoy and continue to grow within your art and find new ways to incorporate things into your process, things like the press or the media, I think you learn how to, see them for what they are and appreciate the work that they do, but also understand that, you need to keep that separate from what you do on the playing field, which, for us is either in a studio or like in somewhere in Montana, literally, in the actual location that Brandon wrote. I'll go on a little tangent here, but that cattle ranch was actually the cattle ranch that he wrote into the script. I mean, he felt like it was that location. He wrote the owner of that ranch as in many ways as Graham's character, and he wrote himself in some ways as the director and the two worlds, because he Brandon moved from California to Montana. So in understanding those two worlds, he was pulling at things that he knows. And so you have to write what you have to create what you know. And as far as the media, like I appreciate what they do. I appreciate being on your show today because you are giving me a platform to share the story within the story. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily have to bleed into the work that I do as an actor, because that's uniquely my process. And I think the more that you can keep those two separate, and it's almost like I tell the production, it's like I'm all in as an actor. When you cast me, like I'm a collaborator, I'm there to serve the story and the material and to bring my best work to the forefront. But when I give that character away and I'm done with that part of it, I am here to become an ambassador for the film, which is, what I'm doing today, right? Because, that's kind of the next step in what's so beautiful about media and social media, is that we can have these conversations like we're having today, and I can kind of tell you a little bit more about, the story of Somewhere in Montana. That way, when you see it, you can experience a little bit more on a deeper level. This is a story and a time in my life in being a part of really this month and a half that I was up in Montana that I will cherish forever, because it was special and I knew it in the moment. You don't necessarily always get, an opportunity to have long conversations and dinners and hikes with collaborators that you respect and grow to love, because I say it meaningfully and truthfully that we really became a family. Like we all bought in on this story. And I think to your point, when you are on a set, maybe doing a guest star on a TV show, or maybe a supporting character on a film, there is still pressure there, but maybe there's not the amount of breadth and time to develop those relationships, which in a way makes your work as an actor even more valuable, right? Because you have to tune out more and you have to engage more in the moment that you are living in that story. But you find ways to do it. Some of the off-screen opportunities and memories are more special for some productions than they are for others. But you have to remember that regardless of maybe getting an hour or days or months with specific collaborators, that sometimes you just connect with people. And I'm very lucky to say that I connected with Graham and Michelle on a very deep level. And there are two people that I highly respect for not only their work, but as human beings, and how much they love actors and how much they truly are pros in how they collaborate and how they, stay open to someone like me that, is more of an unknown actor and is getting my footing, but not looking at me that way. Looking at me as, somebody that was meant to play this role and giving me love and loving me through that. And, sometimes that imposter syndrome can kick in, but once I met them, I felt like I was part of the family, and it just made it really effortless. And for me, I think for this role specifically, it's something that I was very grateful for, because I know that it's not the norm. I know that when you are, like you said, on a studio or, shooting in LA, there can be more noise around you and less time for you to develop those relationships. But this one for me is, like I said, something that I will forever hold dear because of just how much time we got to really become a family and really harness these really special relationships.
I think often as fans, we forget there's a human side to these actors and actresses that goes beyond just the personas that we see on film, that they're real people with their own real stories. And so to be able to kind of tune into that while you're on there as a professional filming something is an opportunity that's, like you said, you'll never forget, versus, showing up on a set. So how did that change you as an actor, having this experience? Because not everyone that's been an actor has that intimacy and privateness that you got as an actor for about a month.
It validated so much for me personally. Again, you're in a class in New York City with 11 other actors for 2.5 years. You get a degree in acting. You have done, probably about 50 stage shows. You grew up doing regional theater. You studied, read plays. You workshop scenes. You audition. You spend so much time and life and effort on something that you truly love. And sometimes you don't necessarily always get validated for it. And, acting and the entertainment industry is very forward facing, I would say, in many ways, at least the people that aren't in it. And so they see the parties and the red carpets. And I always jokingly say, like, who wouldn't want to go out with your, with your date, to a nice party? But it's to celebrate all of the hard work and sacrifice that goes in to these projects. And I think more so into independent films, because they really are. I mean, they are, they're scraping pennies a lot of times. They're asking investors for support. It is a labor of love. It was the first time that I've ever been on set where I knew everybody's name, from the gaffers to the sound design. It was just a very special experience to feel together all the time. And I think for me, to answer your question, I mean, the word that just resonates with me again is validation, because I don't think I'm any more or less of an actor before Somewhere in Montana or after Somewhere in Montana, but it gives me the opportunity to show my mom and dad like my work, for the first time on a bigger stage. My friends who are my family, who I'm actually inviting to a little screening in the theater that I grew up in just next month in Front Royal, Virginia, to bring the town together and to hopefully open it up to the next generation of kids that maybe can see me and say, wow, this is a kid from my hometown, and he went to New York and he went to LA, and he's doing what he loves still at this point in his life. And I don't sugarcoat it. I don't say that it's been easy, because it hasn't been. But again, I don't have any connections to this industry. Like, I've done it from scratch, but I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the sacrifices that I've made because I love it so much. And so I think that, the validation sometimes comes in sharing it with others that know, the times that you've been most down, the times that you have really struggled, the times that you haven't believed in yourself. And to have that moment of celebration with them next month, Greg, I already know it's going to be one of the best nights of my life, because they are my family and I get to see it in their eyes, and hopefully they'll be proud of the film. But I, want to share it with them because of how honored and proud I am that I have the relationships that I have with them, and that they've carried me to this moment in my life.
Nice. Now, one of the questions I have, and this might be above your pay grade, and depending on how long you've been doing this, you might not have the full picture or answer, so bear with me. But Matt Damon once in an interview talked about, not with me, but in an interview he did, talked about how when he was coming up as an actor, he used to be able to do like a big budget like Bourne, but then also be able to do a smaller piece like We Bought a Zoo, something that might not make the big blockbuster money that the Bourne films did, but the money that came off of DVD sales and rentals and stuff like that would make up that kind of financial gap. And nowadays, Somewhere in Montana was in the theater for a bit, but it's already out on video on demand. There isn't that rental thing. Is there any concern as an insider, as an actor, the state of film and television, that we're not able to do Somewhere in Montana maybe 5 years from now because there isn't that funding? How is your feeling on where things are as far as Hollywood is?
It's a tricky question. We have had, obviously, 4 strikes last year in the industry, and we're trying to figure out these uncharted territories with AI, with, we'll say the AMPTP, who, want to invest in the most part for projects that they know will have a good return. Independent films are a labor of love, like I say. I mean, there are so many stories that I've heard on independent films specifically where, people will sell their house, their cars, take out loans to, just have this story come into being because it's something that they feel so passionate about. I mean, it could be a lifelong passion project for them that they have been working for, decades to create, to bring into the world. It is very easy to have an idea for a film. It is a very hard thing to bring it to fruition from beginning to end. And that is something that I think in the world that we're in, we have to support each other in all ways that we can. We have to stand by each other, and we have to continue to know that human stories matter. And I'm talking about all human stories, like we have to have our stories in film and TV reflect humanity. And those stories can only uniquely be told by humans. And so it's very tricky right now. I mean, I could go into specifics on, like my reps, they tell me sometimes that a guest star will show up on TV once and then, it'll go straight to a streaming platform. And, the streaming platforms sometimes hide metadata showing how many impressions that you're getting on that show. So, the people that had the Nielsen ratings in the 90s and the 2000s with like the big shows like Friends and Seinfeld, like those days are kind of behind us at this point because of the way that people consume content, and that's on these streaming platforms. And we need them, but they also need us. And so I'm just hoping, and I always try to look at things from a positive standpoint, that we will find a way to work together to find solutions to make sure that actors are compensated, that cast and crew and production is compensated, and that we can still get returns for the executives that are fronting the money to make these projects happen. So it's a new world. And it is constantly changing, more now than it ever has before. But I think as long as we keep leaning in and appreciating that human stories matter and they need to be told uniquely by humans, I have to believe that hopefully we'll be okay.
There's room still for those kind of stories to be told. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on. Summer in Montana is now available on video on demand. I just have a couple of quick final questions that are sporadic out there, so just bear with me. But all of your bios that I've looked at, anytime I've looked up your name and tried to do a little bit of research on you, it says that you're an avid sports fan, which to me is the Hollywood cop out, because you film in so many different places that you don't want to declare an allegiance to some place. It seems like a safe answer, so I'm just going to put you on point blank. Who is your team?
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I say avid sports fan because I grew up on the East Coast and I pretty much rooted for the New York teams growing up, but I really like rooting for the home team. So now my allegiance is to my LA Rams. I also love the Kansas City Chiefs just because I feel like they do it the right way. I love, again, these coaches like McVay and Andy Reid. Social media is great to just kind of see those locker room moments, just how much love and support they put into the team. I just appreciate that because it's what I've always felt as an actor with the mentors that came into my life. So I have an affinity for coaches and mentors. So it would be those two for football. For baseball, it's my back-to-back World Series champion Dodgers, because like me, the Dodgers moved from New York City to LA, and it's that song that plays in the seventh inning stretch, right? You root for the home team. And so I've really enjoyed watching the joy that they play with. And again, talk about Dave Roberts. I mean, I think even Derek Jeter said it this year, who I grew up seeing, play games, like, because my dad and I used to be Yankee season ticket holders at the old Yankee Stadium. And it's like he said about Dave Roberts, it's almost like he could see the future this year when he was making some of the calls and leaving, Rojas in, having him hit the home run, putting Pajes in and making that big catch. It's special when you just have a belief in your team because of how much time you spend with them. And that's why I say I really love the sports. But yes, I have an allegiance. I wasn't trying to be vague about it. My LA teams are my LA teams, but I just love the sport, almost broader than just my teams is, when I watch, a baseball game in October or November, or I, spend, Sunday football with my wife and my dog. It brings me back to a childhood escape, and I think that's very prevalent of acting for me, is that it was an escape for me. It was a place I could dream, and I see how many dreams are happening in sports, and I think it's a great way to bring people together too, to root for one thing and to let the world kind of like disappear for 3 hours. Is something why I say I'm an avid sports fan. And then basketball, it's my Lakers. Again, I'm going home team here. But I love what LeBron has done for so long, and what an ambassador he is on and off the court. And I'm really enjoying watching Luka now with the Lakers. And again, LA is a big basketball town, so we get really fired up about the Lakers. And hockey is tough. I feel like I'm a little bit divided. I like the Ducks and the Kings, and they're both kind of LA. So I feel like for basketball, I don't root against either team because we've got two real hockey teams and two baseball team or two hockey teams and two basketball teams. We kind of have two baseball teams, but the Dodgers, just because they moved from New York, are my baseball team. But yeah, I root for the home teams, and I'm an LA guy, so I try to find escape in sports whenever I can because again, I see a lot of similarities and parallels to what I do as an actor.
I kind of regret asking that question now because I'm in Minnesota and the passion that you're describing and the winning that you're describing is something that's very foreign to me. And so basically, your answer was a big rub in of how great your teams that you follow are. And so I'm kind of already regretting asking that because it just made me realize how much we suck. So um, I
No,
appreciate
you
that.
don't suck. There. You have to almost look at like the joy of rooting for your home team, and I mean there are things within different leagues that can seemingly be unfair, and I am objective about my teams. I just kind of reflect on the that's why I say avid sports fan because sometimes it's not just about the team that you root for. You're rooting for your city too. You're rooting for the place that you call home. And, we've all had heartbreaks. I mean, believe it or not, even Yankee fans have had heartbreaks and not as many. I understand that. They've been very successful, but I mean, one that I remember growing up that was pretty impactful to me was when, and I know that Derek Jeter said it this year on the panel, is when they didn't win the World Series after 9/11. Like that was one that really could have brought the city together. And again, like, the LA fires that happened this year, I feel like a championship can really, or really just the sport, just going out and seeing your team play and rooting for the players. And now with social media, being able to follow them a little bit more and understanding their stories. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's all about winning. I think it's how you play the game. I really do believe that to my core. So I understand where you're coming from. But yeah, I think just to escape to a baseball game or a hockey or basketball, football is just a great thing to do.
I will say that you did steal the Lakers and the Ducks from Minnesota. Those were both
Yeah.
original teams. Final question. Again, I appreciate your time, but so much of what we do for when we describe an actor is we say Matt Drago, starring in somewhere in Montana. Matt Drago, avid sports fan, fourth degree black belt. But when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror, splash a little water in your face, who is it that you see?
A husband and a dog dad, somebody that is still, just trying to enjoy my journey as an actor and my love of storytelling. I'm a person. I'm no different than anybody else. I just, grew up loving something enough to continue to fight for it and to continue to learn and to continue to grow. And I felt that acting was the best vessel for me to do that in. And so for me, it's just I think I continue to go through life and just really appreciate the journey. And like I said, next month, going back home to my original movie theater and to be able to open that 230 seat theater to family and friends and people that I grew up doing karate with that have supported me for years and years, and to be able to share something, that's a full circle moment for me. And I'm just I continue to just be in love with the process of creating and telling stories, and just try to do what I love as much as I can every day of my life.
Well, Matt Drago, thank you again for coming on. Again, Somewhere in Montana is available on video on demand, and I'll put some links to that so people can find it. I appreciate you coming on and wish you all the success, and look forward to seeing where your career takes you.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's been a pleasure.